an album up to now.
Yeah, and before we didn't have any money to make things like albums, and although we weren't particularly bothered, people seemed to miss the fact that we hadn't put one out.
How do you feel about your material? I mean, I suppose, like, you know, the artists themselves tend to get a bit close to their own material. Some of the stuff you put on the album must be quite old to you.
No, actually, it's all of it fairly recent, because we never stocked material up. We always slammed it out as quick as we'd recorded it. And nothing on the album was written before the middle of last year.
How do you feel the press are taking to the sisters now? Because you were press darlings maybe, 12, 18 months ago, and now there's a little bit of cynicism creeping in. I'm not including maybe the Melody Maker piece in that, but in general.
Well, there's always sections of it that we got on with and sections that we didn't, and the sides don't seem to have changed much.
Would you think that they maybe thought, you know, once after you've been press darlings, that you possibly sold out with your association with Warner's or something, and now you're unfashionable to like because the natural progression of the band means more people are getting into the Sisters of Mercy?
I don't think they ever thought about it that deeply. They just thought, well, they won't talk to us, why should we talk to them? We get on with everybody, really, apart from the enemy.
How do you feel about some of the quotes in the press and the comparison? I mean, I forget which magazine, was it the NME, that there was more mention of Joy Division than the Sisters of Mercy in the review of the album?
I think they feel about us the same way they felt about Joy Division. It all happened up here. They missed out on it. They never quite understood it. They knew it was powerful, but they chose to ignore it and look silly afterwards, and that's pretty much the same with us. I think they lump us in the same category because of that. They regard us as being northern and industrial, and nothing we can ever do will change that, because they just aren't really interested in promoting rock bands from this part of the world any more than they ever were, I don't think.
How do the sisters do in America then? Do they take quite favourably to you?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they're very enthusiastic. It varies from city to city. Yeah, like in New York, we have a good following, but not such a good following, say, in Boston.
Because it's such a huge area to really crack, isn't it, the States? I mean, it's constant touring, and it can amount to years of touring before you even are played on certain stations.
Yeah, that's never particularly bothered us. We did very well on college radio, which is a burgeoning medium.
Yeah, I mean, they're good songs. First and foremost, they are good songs. And everything else, well, you know, the gothic, so-called gothic image is by the way, or at least it should be. I mean, there's too much importance, in our case, stressed on it, but by other people, not by ourselves. No, we're not gothic at all.
It's just unfortunate that we chose to play London about the same time as those horrendous positive punk bands were coming through the system, and we got lumped in the same category by the press again. It's coincidence.
Well, we don't intend to tour again in Britain till at least the autumn, by which time, yeah, we'll have another single out, etc. So, I mean, the venues we're playing on this tour are very similar to the ones we did on the last tour. Yeah, and we're getting a few more people in, but I don't think we're ready to go onto the big venues just yet.
It seems a bit of a shame, really, because, like we say, the Sisters are appealing to a broader cross-section of people, and yet you still won't break out of this rock show format in British radio. Is that true to say?
Yeah,
People like it.
I think there's a sort of stigma attached to a band coming from the sort of left field of music, that they could be a bit sort of subversive or something. But I mean, I listen to daytime airplay, and you hear things like Meatloaf, and I mean, some of those
A lot of that stuff really is offensive.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting that I, at last, saw a Sisters of Mercy video on, was it the Tube this week? Is that like, after all, however many, is it 3-4 years or so, you've at last broken through and people have seen you on television? Have you made a video before, actually?
We made 2 videos for that. The Tube refused to show either of them. I think they figured they've got to play us now. Before, they weren't quite prepared to play the game without slight bending of the rules, and we didn't really want to be dictated to by TV, and that we've taken the consequences. 4 years of no coverage at all.
Well, I think maybe like 1985 is possibly the time when you look at some of the bands that have grown from strength to strength from selling albums, not necessarily playing music like yourself, but bands like U2 and Simple Minds. They never really needed hit singles, yet they appear on Top of the Pops. I presume that Sisters of Mercy, should the record go, maybe the next single go top 30, you wouldn't be averse to doing programmes like that?
No, not at all.
So as musicians, you just want as many people as possible to hear music and then make their mind up?
When we were young, we got a real kick out of singing our heroes on Top of the Pops, and when we were young, we wouldn't have got to see them at all if they hadn't gone on Top of the Pops.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think a lot of the elitism of music has probably disappeared over the last 4 or 5 years, and musicians that, you know, in the days of The Clash will never do Top of the Pops.
Yeah, I think the elitism has disappeared with musicians, but I think it's still there a lot with fans.
Well, that's interesting, because I actually disagree with you, because I do a programme where I feel I can play anything if I think it's a decent record.
No.
People don't.
Maybe I'm alone. I mean, you tell me.
A lot of the people we play to have got a lot of prejudices about people like WEA being involved and giving us money and things like putting out glossy covers on records and stuff like that. It sort of offends them somehow. They don't realise that neither the Sex Pistols or the Clash ever put out a record on an independent label.
I find it pretty sad that they've got that attitude, but nevertheless, I mean...
Well, after so many years of sort of maybe seeming to pander to that mentality, and after so many years of not really getting anywhere by way of rewarding ourselves, we've stopped taking into account altogether now. And if they have a problem with that, I'm afraid it's their problem.
Well, it's nice to hear you say that, because at the end of the day, I mean, they don't actually own the Sisters of Mercy, do they? And they'd be the first to complain if they couldn't buy your record, which is what happens when a band reaches a certain level.
Absolutely, absolutely.
body and a dream of the dead days.